firstly, I will have a quick introduction and then give the platform to you. So let me have a quick introduction here. Okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So go to the full screen. Okay, let's start. Dear all the friends, firstly, let me quickly give an introduction of energy vision.
There's no audio. You know how to get the audio on?
Sorry?
Do you know how to share with audio?
Share with audio, you mean?
Because I didn't get the audio.
Oh, really?
No. So if you go to the share, before you share the screen, if you go to the green share, before you share the screen, at the bottom of the screen that shows up, you can check a box to transfer audio. You have to stop sharing first. Stop sharing.
Oh, okay, I see.
Now, when you go to the share, at the bottom of the screen, you see share sound. Check that box, and then you can share.
Ah, I see. Okay. So Energy Vision is a platform offering various of activities as shown here. And today we are glad to have Dr. Shittu here to give us a talk. And the topic is equitable accessibility in solar deployment. So the seminar is about 1 hour and including the 15 minutes Q&A session. And my name is Ruijing, and I'm a seminar host today. So here is a quick introduction of Dr. Shittu. He is an associate professor from George Washington University, US. His research focuses on the interplay between public policy, competition, and energy investments, and has been supported by the National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, Technology Modernization Fund, and etc. He was a lead author for the 5th assessment report for the IPCC, and he holds the bachelor degree in electrical engineering, master degree in industrial engineering, and a Ph.D. degree in industrial engineering and operation research. Okay, let's welcome Dr. Shittu, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rui. Thanks for organizing this. Let me see if I can share my screen. Before I do, I'll probably first have to present, then I choose which screen to share. Just 1 second here. Okay, so now I can share my screen too. Do you see the screen I'm sharing?
Ah, yes.
You see the screen I'm sharing, right? Okay. So if you see that, and is it showing the words I'm saying? Is it
yes,
typing
yes.
out? Okay, I'm gonna take that out.
Okay.
Okay, I think it's out now. Is that fine? Still
Yeah, it's
sharing the
good.
screen? Okay, thank
Yes.
you very much, Rui. You know, there are two Ruis I get to see now. There's Rui Q and there's Rui Jean. Thanks so much for organizing this. I appreciate the invitation. I'll be talking to us today about examining equitable accessibility in sustainability transitions, especially with emphasis on utility solar deployment and low and middle income households. So we'll be looking at how utilities have deployed solar technology to low and middle income communities in the country. And when I say in the country, I'm talking about in the United States. My name is Ekundayo Shittu here at the Engineering Management and Systems Engineering Department at the George Washington University. Again, thanks for inviting me for this presentation to Energy Vision Seminar Series. Today, I'll be taking us through what I call 3 bubbles. In the first bubble, I'll give you an introduction to Systems Modeling Laboratory, which is my laboratory, and what I do in my lab with my grad students and affiliates. Then the second bubble will unlock the very first question, which is about the market potentials for solar adoption. And then the third bubble will extend that unlocking into looking at how customer income and policy affect consumer accessibility to solar electricity. Please give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I had somebody at my door. So sustainability transition. So we're going to look at customer income and policy effects and consumer accessibility to solar electricity. But before I get started, I'll talk about my lab, which I call Systems Modeling Laboratory for Economic Decisions, which you can, acronym as SysMoled. SysMoled. Okay. In my lab, I look at energy technology portfolios. When I talk about energy technology portfolios, I'm talking about technologies such as alternative technologies like renewable, solar, wind, geothermal. I also look at conventional technologies such as fossil-based power plants and nuclear technologies and hydro, for example. Then I look at how risk and uncertainty, especially risk and uncertainty in public policy, affect investment into these technologies. So I use my research to inform public policy, firm strategy, especially in the context of decisions surrounding adoption of new technologies and investment into these new technologies. As you know, some of these decisions are riddled in uncertainty. So there is risk about the investment decisions that are being made. So what do I use? I use a modeling of systems interdependence, because now we're talking about the interdependence between energy systems, the rest of the society, energy systems, food systems, energy systems, water systems, system interdependence. And I use mainly optimization models and econometrics to address some of those questions with the lens of informing climate change policy and also informing how to manage the technologies that we have in the mix of technologies for generating electricity. With that said, I'll talk about some of the current research I have in my lab that we're working on right now. For example, resilience and interdependence. We're looking at the evaluation of the nexus of food, energy, and water systems. One of my PhD students, Tianyi Wang, is working on this particular project and is been funded by the National Science Foundation. We're looking at technology management, synthetic time histories for wind energy in integrated energy systems. This is being funded by the Department of Energy. We're also looking at make or buy decisions in the wind energy industry. And then one recent project we just started working on is what we can learn from biology to inform healing in power networks. This is what we call bio-inspired healing in power systems. So we're looking at general birth and death processes combined with chain binomial epidemic models, okay? And that's been funded by the National Science Foundation. We're also looking at service learning for innovation. In other words, how do we engage engineering students to learn better and connect deeper with their engineering discipline? And the last project, which I omitted, is democratizing energy, clean energy access, which is the framework of today's topic. And it's been funded by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Here we're going to be examining community solar programs to understand the factors that influence adoption trends and patterns. And what are the factors inhibiting the adoption of community solar projects by utilities? So that's what we'll be looking at. So without much ado, I'll get started by teasing out what sustainability transitions entail. So by sustainability transitions in two thrusts. In the first thrust, I'll be answering questions related to how do we unlock the market potential for LMI. When I say LMI, I'm talking about low and middle income households. These are households that earn less than $30,000 a year. These are categorized by income bracket as low and middle income families. How can we make these low and middle income families have access to solar technology when we know fully well that it's only the rich, those that have private homes, that tend to have solar on their rooftops? How do we make low and middle income people also access clean electricity? That's the first question. Then the second thrust is looking at, can we evaluate the effort by the utility to actually provide that accessibility to these low and middle income families? So we're going to review some of the factors that drive the decisions that utilities make and some of the factors that seem to inhibit how utilities gain access to the market. So when I talk about community solar projects, I'm basically referring to local solar facilities that are shared by multiple community subscribers. Remember, we're focusing on low and middle income families. These are families that do not have enough wherewithal to have their own rooftop. These are families that live in multi-family complexes. Okay, these are high-rise, high-rise complexes with many subunits within this high-rise. So we're talking about shared rooftop across these families. So we're looking at community solar projects where community subscribers who receive credit on their electricity bills for their share of power produced, and that's by the Solar Energy Industries Association in 2020. So we're adopting that definition of community solar project. The capacity for community solar projects tend to be 5 or less megawatts, often within the same county as the customer consuming the electricity. Another characteristic of CSPs is that they are suitable for customers who do not, like I mentioned earlier, who do not own their own rooftops, right? Those customers are those that we're targeting and do not have the financial resources to purchase or finance their own solar panel installations. In fact, a Green Tech Media survey in 2015, just about 6 years ago, estimated that about 77% of US households are potential participants for community solar projects, showing that there is a massive opportunity for community solar projects to penetrate the entire landscape of residential communities across the US. Now, talking about the entire landscape, you can see the US new annual generating capacity by different technologies. Look at wind, natural gas, coal, and others. The most stringent that is growing massively is solar, the very deep blue line. You can see from 2010, where it was barely 2% of the total capacity additions, as of 2021. And this data for 2021 was actually midway through 2021. It wasn't at the end of 2021. We're already looking at solar constituting more than 50% of new generating capacity additions in the United States. And when you look at out of that 50% we see in this graph, okay, what proportion of that is community solar project? Again, you can see the growth of community solar installations across different states in the country. And you can see that the main players are states like Minnesota, you have states like Massachusetts, you have states like you have states like New York. These are states where they are promoting massively the adoption of community solar projects. So again, what is the thrust one of this research? What are the barriers, the drivers that influence community solar project adoption, including in low and middle income households? How can the market potential for CSPs be further unlocked, okay, beyond the group of early adopter utilities? And like I mentioned, This project was supported by the Alpha Priest Loan Foundation, Grant G2 2019-11440. By the way, when we talk about this thrust, let me take you through our research design, because this is a social study. Our research design entails three main activities. In the first activity, we conducted interviews, okay? In the first phase, interviews where we focus on developers, financial supporters of community solar projects, adoption barriers, adoption opportunities. So we interviewed about 23 people at a solar conference, asking them questions about what are the barriers to solar adoption in low and middle income communities. In the second phase, we now deployed a survey, okay? We deployed a survey that we bifurcated into two tranches. In one track, we looked at utilities that have adopted community solar that already are in the business ecosystem of building community solar projects. And then we also surveyed utilities that are yet to adopt community solar projects. And the idea is we really want to look at a slate of stakeholders in this ecosystem: independent power producers, utilities, government decision makers, policy makers, financial organizations like banks, how the financial mechanism is set up. We're looking at even the consumers. So we conducted a survey where we got almost 180, I think 179 complete responses across the stakeholder group. Then in the third phase, we now conducted a workshop where we brought everybody in over a whole day in the same room where we talked about some of these issues. What are the barriers? How do we know what is a successful project? What are the financing goals? Can we discuss what the future looks like for community solar projects? And of course, the last aspect of this work is the analysis, where we did a cross-sectional analysis of the data from the three phases of this research, where we try to understand what is the initial concept and understanding of CSPs. What are CSP and low and middle income barriers and opportunities? And we try to look at the big picture. So we step back to see the big picture of what the entire ecosystem says. So what did we find? Well, what we found is at the Solar and Storage Finance and Investment Conference in Austin, where we conducted these interviews, some of the questions we're asking were, do you participate in CSP initiatives? Why or why not? If yes, what is your organization's role? What were your challenges and motivations? We asked questions like, what non-utility partners, okay? What non-utility partners do you work with, or who need to work with to make CSP a reality? That means who are the people you are currently working with, or you may have to work with to make it a reality? Who initiates the networks and interactions? How would you include LMI participants, given that there are challenges and some motivations behind their participation? These are the questions we asked at the workshop, okay? In the survey, like I mentioned earlier, we bifurcated the survey into two tracks. In one track, we looked at those utilities that have already adopted community solar projects. And we asked questions related to, does your organization have CSP installations in low and middle income communities? Why did you have them? Why do you not have them? Is CSP financing influenced by the intent to involve LMI participants? What makes your decisions different when you look at low and middle income families? What's the ease of consideration of these low and middle income families? What were strong barriers? What are the major obstacles to having low and middle income families enjoy this community solar project? Again, these are the group of early adopter utilities. These are some of the questions we asked in the survey. Then the second aspect of the survey, okay, look at those that are yet to adopt. Those are utilities that, yes, they produce electricity, but they are yet to adopt community solar project. In this case, we're asking questions, for example, to what extent do you consider subscription, financials, policy, and partnerships as barriers to including LMI in CSPs? If adopting a CSP, will it include low and middle income households? Why would you do that? Why would you not do that? So these are questions we ask yet to adopt segment of the stakeholders in the survey that we conducted. Then the third phase was a workshop. In the workshop, we wanted to understand the market potential for CSP beyond the early adopters so that we can unlock the participation for low and middle income families. In order to achieve that, we separated the workshop into 4 buckets. It was a whole day. We started at 9 a.m. and we ended at 5 p.m. We clustered into different buckets. The first bucket was looking at what are the barriers, okay? What are the concerns that utilities have? Why are they yet to make the adoption? Then in the second bucket, we looked at evaluating successful projects. What constitutes successful projects for community solar projects? Utilities, NGOs, policymakers. We had a lot of people in the room for this workshop addressing this bucket. Then we looked at community financing, because in many cases, it's always about show me the dollars. Utilities will not engage if there is no financial benefit to building some of these technologies. So we try to understand that in a session. And then we close the day by talking about the future. What will be the focus of the future? What is missing in our dialogue? What will influence change as we go forward? Now that you've seen what we looked at, let me introduce you to some of the theoretical, practical implications of what we're doing. When we talk about practical theoretical clusters, what we're trying to understand is what are the thematic questions? What is the theoretic basis and what are the practical basis? Remember, theory can be very different from practical. So we're trying to understand what's the theoretical implication of what utilities are doing or that are not doing. And again, what's the practical basis of what they are doing? And that's what we have in the interviews, the survey, and the workshop. Now, with that said, what's the distribution of our stakeholders? Our stakeholders are made up of power providers, governments, entities, representatives, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, developers and installers of this technology. We have academic partners, professors in the room, consulting organizations, and financial institutions like banks and financing mechanisms for some of these energy systems. So you can see for the interview, we had 23 participants or 23 respondents at the interview. Majority of them were the developers. Remember, this was an interview that took place at a solar energy finance and development conference in Austin, Texas. That was in 2019. And then the survey had 174. I misspoke earlier by saying 179. 174 respondents for the survey. Majority of them in this case are power providers, the utilities. Remember, the survey was actually targeted at utilities, basically those that have adopted community solar and those that are yet to adopt community solar. And you can see from the distribution here that we also have government entities in the survey. And then finally, in the workshop, you see that the workshop is evenly divided because the workshop was the last activity we carried out. So we invited some of the people we interviewed earlier. We invited some of the people who responded to our survey. And those are the people that came for the workshop. We had 39 people in the workshop. And you can see the distribution. It cuts across developers. You have NGOs, you have academic entities, consulting, you have financial institutions, and you see the mix of people we have in the room. With that said, let me give a quick definition to what we mean by low and middle income access. Low and middle income households, they make between $32,000. In fact, it's lower than $32,000. But by Snyder's definition from 2020 paper, it's between $32,000 and $54,000 in annual income. They do not own a rooftop, neither do they have a high credit, okay? They have low credit. These are people that are really struggling because they are low income earners. This reinforces the reality of their price consciousness because solar is still a what? It's still a premium priced commodity in many, meaning that solar is still expensive, believe it or not. So here we're taking participation as yes, if subscription price is less than prevailing electricity cost. Otherwise, if the price of subscription is not less than what they get from their normal utility, they will not participate. So the question here is, how do we make the subscription price lower than the price they pay for their normal electricity? Well, the result we found with surveys, from the survey we conducted, you see that in terms of percent of LMI customers by yet to adopt CSP utilities, you see that those utilities that are yet to adopt have a significant proportion of their customers, less than 50%, constituting those LMI customers for yet to adopt utilities. When you look at the number of customers they have, that less than 10% of these utilities have customers that are LMI served in their ecosystem. When you now flip to the other side of this chart, the second chart on the right, it shows early adopters of CSP in LMI communities. And you can see we have 108 respondents. And of those 108 respondents, you can see that a significant 95% of them actually said yes, that they have installations in low and middle income communities. With that said, what are the barriers that we found to the adoption of CSP? In the interview phase, what we found as barriers were the absence of economies of scale, absence of regulation to support clean energy introduction. Stakeholder engagement was weak and limited. Then the other problem, which was significant, was the location of the space to place these solar panels. So the space constraint was a major issue. These are the other barriers that we found from those that identified barriers to CSP adoption. Now, for the yet to adopt organizations, remember, in this case, for the barriers we're looking at here, this is from the interview phase. From the survey, we again look at, for those organizations, utilities that are yet to adopt CSP, what are their barriers? And you can see that there is a very high correlation between the barriers we identified earlier and the barriers we're seeing now. For example, current contracts for traditional energy are lower. In other words, CSP pricing is way higher than current contracts they have, which is a barrier to them making those installations. High cost of implementation. Implementing and building the solar panels on rooftops, on community spaces is actually expensive. CSP knowledge for some of the utilities is limited. There's what we call the legitimacy effect of these installations. Some utilities have the experience, some do not. So in this case, we're talking about the knowledge of the utility in making the installation. Then you have return on investment, net present value, lack of community demand, absence of state level policies, lack of suitable location. Location. Where are you going to place the community solar, panels? And in this case, you can see that there's a correlation between the interview responses we got and the survey that we conducted. Now, the next is the workshop. What do we see in the workshop as barriers? Many of the major barriers, we condensed them into particular silos, which we identified as standardization, because when it comes to interconnection of intermittent electricity with stable electricity, there has got to be some sort of standardization, which does not exist now. Then there's the idea behind interconnection, determining the cost of the burden of interconnection between these facilities. Then there are dynamic contracts. How do you set up the contract in a way that allows someone who earns low income to participate? Then absence of education, efficiency and grid improvements were some of the other barriers that we found from the workshop. So you can see that while there is a strong correlation between the barriers that we identified from the interviews and the barriers we identified at the survey, the workshop actually showed a different set of barriers, which were not captured at the survey or the interview phase. So what are the barriers to LMI installation? Again, remember, all of this we mentioned earlier were basically just CSP implementation, just main broadly CSP barriers. But now, barriers to low and middle income. What are the barriers to low and middle income installation? The total cost of participation. Signing low and middle income households for CSP participation is a huge challenge. Educating these low income people, identifying suitable households for participation. These were the main barriers for low and middle income based on the survey. Now, when you look at barriers to LMI installations, for those that have already adopted, for utilities that have already adopted, what we find is that the absence of policy. There's no policy saying, as a utility, go towards these low and middle income families and make installations. Lack of partner interest, financial viability of the project. These are barriers to adoption by the early adopters against the low and middle income installations. So what are the policies for CSP adoption and LMI inclusion? What we find from the survey is there's got to be strong financial support, standard regulation across board must be in place, and there must be significant motivation and a broad national energy strategy, in addition to energy policies, environmental policies, and financial performance. So in the survey, motivation for LMI inclusion cuts across the early adopter group, the yet to adopt group. You can see issues like community benefits, community-driven, grid benefits, enhanced business performance for the early adopters. For the yet to adopt, they will be motivated to adopt if they can be labeled as doing good or doing well by doing good. For example, environmental stewardship, state regulations, business development, and responding to ratepayers, whatever the demand of the ratepayers are. Those are the motivations for inclusion. And then for the workshop, what we found as themes on success stories, we find that the same issues related to standardization, interconnection, dynamic contracts, and efficiency are all woven into what adoption drivers are and what makes utilities to make this investment, especially in low and middle income families. Notice that I keep talking about financing. What did we find with respect to finance? When we zoomed in on finance, what we found was that, look, the options for CSP adoption for the yet to adopt utilities is basically in form of financial benefit of tax credits. Okay, loan or bonds, for example, investment bonds and grants. These are the kind of things that the yet to adopt are saying that if they are available, maybe they are going to adopt this CSP technology. Then in terms of inclusion of low and middle income families, for the early adopters, financing, business development, project development, and yet to adopt, again, financing, business. So there is a strong correlation between the factors that you find for those that have adopted and even those that are yet to adopt. That's why in collapsing everything within the workshop, we found that the issues related to economies of scale, strong policy support, grants, anchor customers, different market rates, green banks, the market for green electricity, okay, design incentives. There are lots of issues that we uncovered in the course of this research. So what are the cross-cutting themes across the three phases? That is across the interviews, survey, and workshop. This figure here identifies the cross-cutting themes across the three phases, especially with respect to economies of scale, absence of policies, stakeholder alignment, and more importantly, suitable project location. Notice I highlighted that because it resonated not only across the three phases, but more significantly for LMI participation, which is what you have in the last column. So with this said, this paper I just presented has been published in Energy Policy. It just got published, accepted in December 2021 in Energy Policy. But now to go above and beyond and above, to show you why that location is a major issue, look at this news article from 2021, September 2021. Solar project helps to reclaim site of notorious Boston area toxic waste case. The detail of the story says a community solar installation generating power for low-income residents and homeless shelters has come online at a suburban Boston property previously best known for its role in a notorious toxic waste case in the 1980s. And this is a quote from one of the project development associates. It's taken a spot that had so much controversy and so much negativity around it, and gives a new positive life to it. Why am I talking about this? This is a location for previously used for toxic waste disposal. And now this location is being rebuilt to accommodate 362 kilowatts of solar installation, mainly for who? For low and the homeless in the community in Boston, Massachusetts. So when you look at this particular research topic, what we did was try to unlock the market potentials for community solar projects across the phases of the interview, the survey, and the workshop. And with that said, we identified some shared themes across the three phases, like community education is important, stakeholder engagement, standardization, and we talked about components of grid modernization and distributed energy policy. These are very strong points that we filtered and sieved out of the three phases of the research. These are some pictures from the workshop. When we had the workshop, it was a full house. 39 people were in attendance at this workshop, which started at 9 a.m. and ended at 5 p.m. And we had participants from all over the country in this room, from regulators to policymakers, to academics, to financial gurus, to business consultants. We have them in this workshop. And there are other pictures I like to show here. This was a session where we're looking at adoption during campaigns and persistence, cumulative installations by town, by campaign. You can see the level of discussion going on in this panel. These are some of the participants that attended the workshop. Now that brings me to the end of the first thrust in terms of unlocking the potential for market participation. The second thrust is, how do we evaluate efforts to provide that clean access, okay? How does the interplay between customer income and policy affect customer accessibility to solar electricity in the United States? When we focus on utilities actions, we're basically saying certain policies have been enacted to incentivize private actors to embrace the transition to clean technologies. Now, such policies, as we found, contributed to incumbents taking the first steps. In other words, you put a policy in place and then the incumbent utilities take the first steps towards the transition. Specifically, they engage in various activities that concern scaling with respect to bill credit rates and ability of third-party ownership. These are different structures. Each has a foundation for enabling bill crediting for customers participating in community solar programs. So what we don't see yet, which is why we're looking at this in a research exercise, is we're yet to see to what extent are customers having access to CSP technologies. To what extent, okay? How much are they really having access? When you look at the map of the United States, as of 2017, you can even say as of 2018, these are states with enabling policies, okay? The orange states, as you can see in this graph, are the states that have policies in place to support community solar projects. And then you notice that there's some sort of correlation between the states that are in orange and the utility with community solar in its service territories. Now, there are some states without policy that also have community solar, but strongly you can see that the orange states like California, Nevada, Seattle, that's Washington State, you can see the Northeast entirely. Those are areas where you have policies in place. But this was as of 2018. Now, this takes me to what we call the distributional impact of environmental policy. It is a question surrounded by market efficiency. In other words, can market efficiency be achieved by increasing the prices of conventional options? Remember, we can institute a policy whereby we make the normal fossil-based electricity to be more expensive. Maybe we put a tax on them, right? If you tax the fossil technology, then it becomes more expensive. And as a result, your solar becomes a very viable technology. That can make the switching to renewables, which follows what we call the Pavlovian effect that results in a Laffer curve behavior and reduces consumption of fossil-based technology. But consumers tend to gravitate to energy-efficient appliances, or at a geographically spatial level, they exhibit what we call community choice aggregation, CCA, for shared solar, okay? Now, What we mean by democratizing energy access is through liberalization of electricity policies. And if we can liberalize those policies, then policymakers who ordinarily are hesitant to increase energy prices may actually opt for energy efficiency mandates, despite the vulnerability of such prescriptions for market failures. This is a very theoretical slide, so I'll move on because the main point here is that the distributional impact of efficiency gains induced by high prices imply LMI household expenditure on energy is proportionally higher. They pay more. Let me give you an example. If I earn $1,000 a month and my electricity bill is $100. That means I'm paying 10% of my income to do what? To pay electricity bill. Compare with somebody who earns $50,000 a month and also pays the same $100. The point we're making here is that low and middle income households, by nature of certain policies, are already at a disadvantage. And that's why we're looking at this question. So how do we incentivize participation? I see I'm running out of time, but I'll talk about 3 levers that we see as examples in the United States. For example, there is subsidized participation, which we find with New York Public Utilities Commission private pilot program, especially with the utility in New York called Consolidated Edison. What did they do? Through their low-income bill assistance program, they are generating 3 megawatts of electricity saving for 1,000 customers, where they get the benefit of $5 per month. In other words, the other ratepayers incur the higher cost differential. So what we're doing here is this utility, Consolidated Edison, have installed the solar panels, 3 megawatts of capacity, and they share them across 1,000 low and middle income. And this sharing means that those customers are saved $5 per month from their utility expenses. Another model we see is the model in the middle, where leverage external funding is implemented. The Grand Valley Power in Colorado partner with Grid Alternatives. Grid Alternatives is an environmental energy electricity think tank in the United States. Participants are chosen every year in a lottery, every 2 years in a lottery, and upfront capital costs are offset by equipment donations by utilities. So you see how some of these implementations are being carried out in reality. The third one you have on the right is structured customer offer, which is implemented by Rocky Mountain Power, where the solar program in the state of Utah, where subscribers receive a bill credit for actual production. Again, we're trying to bring the benefits that utilities find in the adoption of this technology. So if the business model is right, utilities will adopt. If the base income of the customer is not sufficient, then utilities may have that holdback hesitation to adopt the technology. So what we're trying to say here is that the gap in literature is the extent to which incumbents leverage their efforts for greater diffusion. So what did we do in this project? What we did was very simple. We collected archival data, which we found at NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, on CSPs, on community solar projects, as at the spring of 2018. Every community solar project in the United States as at 2018 identified the CSPs by name, location, where they are based, the grid connection year, the capacity of the project. Then we went on the website of 543 CSPs locations. In other words, from the list of NREL, we identified those 543 utilities and we went on their website, okay? And we used utility as a unit of analysis. And then we collected archival data set. At the end of the day, to get a holistic data set, we went from 543 community solar utility projects down to 187 utility websites. And we looked at each website of each utility. It was a snapshot in time. It's almost like somebody taking a picture. A snapshot in time, as of 2020, for 187, we got a group of graduate students, go on each utility website and collect some information. Then there's also secondary data from the EIA 861 data file, and the Desire. Desire is a database of state incentives for renewable energy. The database has a lot of data related to energy across the state of the United States. So what does our sample look like? Our sample is a distribution of utilities with CSPs. As you can see by the color-coded map, the deep green is showing between 8 and 22 utilities. The light green in the middle is 4 to 7 utilities, and then 1 to 3 utilities is a very light green shaded state. And then, of course, there are some states that we did not cover any utilities in those states. As you can see, like Wyoming, South Dakota, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. You have, again, this is based on the data set that we got from NREL that we reduced down to the CSP utilities, and we went down to the utilities that actually are represented by those CSPs we found in the NREL database. So what does our data look like? In terms of the count of CSP engagement on their website, response to customer interest was given by some utilities. As you can see, that's the red bar, response to customer. That means that the utilities did that because they were responding to interest from the customers. Part of doing good. They felt it was also part of doing good as a corporate social responsible organization. Take advantage of policy. Advantage of policy means policies have been put in place to incentivize these utilities in building this community solar project. And you can see broader renewable energy strategy were some of the other reasons they gave for CSP engagement. In terms of educational features on the website, very few of them had minimal educational information about CSPs. Some of them provide basic information. Some provide visual electricity generation to allow those that are not very educated to at least understand what electricity generation is all about, and in terms of payment and directed to third parties. So what did we do in this analysis? We collected the data and we identified a dependent variable. 3 dependent variables, by the way. LMI accessibility. In other words, if the website mentions that CSP is being made accessible to low and middle income households, this variable is coded 1. If the website does not mention it, the variable is coded 0. The second dependent variable is utility support customer-owned rooftop solar, which is coded 1 if the website mentions support for customer-owned rooftop, 0 otherwise. And the third dependent variable is participation via ownership, the method of participation, where if it is by ownership, you code it as a 1. Otherwise, if it is by subscription, we code it a 0. With these 3 dependent variables, what are our explanatory variables? We have a lot of explanatory variables, including customer base, average income, age of the renewable portfolio standard in the state where the utility exists, retail choice market, whether the market is deregulated or not, solar incentives for solar electricity. And we had a lot of control variables ranging from, is there a third-party intermediary, like a financial institution, to engage in the installation? Are there electric cooperatives to capture the type of utility in the sample? Percentage of residential customers in the utilities database, net metering customers, net generation, response to customer interest, doing good. Was it mentioned on their website, for example? Age of the CSPs they have installed. All of these factors we captured. And our estimation basically is using logistic regression. Our estimator is a basic logistic regressor that estimates a linear regression defined as a logit of pi I equal to the vector of our regression coefficient and the variable beta. And you find that we have the logit of probability pi I as a linear function of the predictors. In other words, the xi vector of covariates and the beta a vector of coefficients, where that exponential of the beta coefficient is equal to the ratio of pi I divided by 1 minus pi I, where pi I is actually equal to this expression, you can rearrange this mathematically. But the point here is the left-hand side is in the familiar probability scale. The right-hand side is a nonlinear function of the predictors. And then we looked at our 3 dependent variables. Remember, I talked about 3 dependent variables, and those are the random variables that also take a value of 0 or 1. When your dependent variables are binary, then you are going to use a logistic regression. And with that said, the 3 dependent variables are LMI access, which is 1 if LMI is accessible, 0 otherwise. Support for rooftop solar, 1, otherwise it's 0. Participation, 1 for ownership, 0 for subscription. When we ran our model, what did we find? We found, first and foremost, in this table, that in the first model in the table, right, that shows the control variables. The coefficient of the percentage of residential customers is negative, a beta of negative 7.076. And it is significant at 1% level, indicating that more residential utility sales reduce the likelihood that a utility promotes access to LMI customers for their community solar program. This result suggests that greater electricity sales to residential customers are not associated with greater what? With greater targeted solar access for LMI customers. So the coefficient for utility sustainability or doing good, that other coefficient you see there, 2.151, you see it, 2.151, while the coefficient for utilities motivation by customer interest in community solar is negative 2.661, which is significant at a p-value of 0.05. So what we're trying to say here is that the level of engagement is driven by some of these parameters. Now, when you look at the next model, model 2, 3, 4, 5, what we're actually addressing there is what is the role of solar incentives in model 2? You can see solar incentives is positive and significant at 0.258. The next model 3 focuses on customer-based income and customer-based average income squared. You can see that the higher the customer income is, the more likely the utilities to support community solar project, showing that what we felt about income is actually significant and it's accounted for in this model. Model 4, as you can see, shows that the customer average base income, when interacted with the retail choice market, whether you have deregulated market, is actually negative, showing that there is a negative impact of the interaction of retail choice market and base income on adoption decisions. And the last one you see there, customer-based average income interacted with solar incentives, is also negative, but not significant. So when we talk about LMI accessibility between choice versus incentives, what you find is for retail choice competition, you have this interaction effect taking place. And for solar incentives, you have this specifically in the presence of retail choice. The broken line you see here tells us the likelihood of a utility emphasizes LMI accessibility to community solar is higher, the lower the average income. In contrast, in the absence of retail choice, that's the black thick line that you see rising up, LMI accessibility to what? LMI accessibility to community solar is higher, the higher the average base income. So what does this finding tell us? The finding shows that utilities are more likely to support LMI accessibility to community solar in traditional retail markets when they have a higher income base than those that are low income. In contrast, utilities are more likely to support LMI accessibility in the presence of a lower average income customer base, especially in competitive retail markets. That is when we see that the need for policy deregulating the market, even when you do that, is sufficient for utilities to embrace installations in this low and middle income market. So when you talk about utility support for rooftop, what you see here are 3 models identifying each of our decision variable for model 1, model 2, model 3, showing that first and foremost, rooftop solar intermediary, broader renewable energy strategy, response to customer interest are significant and positively correlated. When you add retail choice market, even strengthens the performance of the model in terms of utility supporting rooftop solar panel. And model 3 has the customer base average income, provided there is policy interacted with that. And again, you can see the rest of this result. I'm going to skip over the rest of this to get to the end of this talk so that we don't get out of time and leave some room for questions. Empirical observations, as you can see, utilities are more likely to support LMI accessibility in the presence of policy, provided their customer base are mainly LMI households. Policy interventions, such as solar incentives or competitive markets, promote LMI accessibility. And we know that there are usual subsets, in terms of the results and analysis. By the way, this work has also been published in Energy Economics, I believe, or Energy Policy Journal as of 2022. This was just recently accepted. These are the members of my lab. From left to right is Fanjuan. Fanjuan just completed his master's degree. I have Tianyi Wang. Tianyi is a second-year PhD student. I have Weijie Pan. Weijie Pan is a second-year PhD student. I have Dor Ersh Bagai. Dor just graduated his PhD and has started working for the Northwest Power and Conservation Council as a senior analyst. I have Wale. I have Dor, myself comes next. Then I have Javier Gonzalez de la Garrica. He just graduated and is getting a job at an energy finance firm in New York. I have Christian Lane. Christian Lane is working for Deloitte Consulting as an energy expert. And I have Olawale Ogunride, who just also graduated his PhD and is working for a Fortune 500 quoted company in Iowa, starting this June. So these are the students I have in my lab. Some are continuing, some have graduated. I know I've gone over time. We have about 5 minutes for questions. I'll keep quiet. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for presenting a very insightful survey results on the barriers and the solutions for the MI household to install the solar technology. So do we have any questions from the audience?
Any questions? Everybody's quiet.
So maybe I can ask some questions first.
Okay.
So I would like to know that for all the household or communities with available places to install solar technologies in US, how much percent will be the LMI household roughly?
So it's based on. I'm going to talk. I'll come to you. Sorry. I'm a very busy man. People are always coming. Okay, so your question is, what's the percentage of LMI households, right?
Yeah.
So what we find is that when you look at LMI, let me see if I have the backup. Our plans to adopt CSP, levels of count of CSPs by utilities. I'm trying to see target population LMI. So you can see in this graph, right? Here you are looking at municipal utilities, investor-owned utilities, and cooperative utilities. This shows the proportion of LMI in their customer base. So when you talk about a cooperative, for example, cooperatives, as you can tell, is community-owned. That's why you have a high proportion of LMIs in their customer base. When you look at investor-owned utilities, these are utilities that are listed on the stock market, like Edison, whatever, and Waterview, Pepco, and Waterview. These have the proportion of LMI in their household, and then you have municipal utilities as well. So again, that's the distribution slide. I'm trying to see if I have any other chart that shows the information you're asking by utility type, cooperator-owned utility. I think that's the closest I have to answering your question. But basically, you know, there are also some communities where those communities are entirely LMI households. You see all the sky-rise buildings, multifamily complexes. That's why you say, I'm going to Ward 7, Ward 8, Ward 9. Those are mainly LMI households. And the question is, what percentage of that constitutes a utilities customer base?
Okay, thank you. I see.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a following questions for that. for those community or household PV projects, will it be built as a DC system and the energy generated will be consumed locally, or will the generated solar power be converted to the AC power and feedback to the main grid?
Very
Which way
good
is
question.
more common? Yeah.
Very good question. So what you see here, when we talked about, let me just go to the slide, where we talked about community solar projects right here. You see, suitable for consumers who do not own their own rooftops or do not have financial resources, right? To your question, I have a particular slide, but to answer your question directly, what you find is that those members of the community where the solar technology are benefiting from the power produced by that technology. Now, how does the technology work? The technology works by mainly harvesting direct current, right? Just direct voltage. Now, there are inverters in place. Those inverters help to convert to alternating that can be used for different uses in these communities. But to your question about location of the consumers and the panel itself, they are usually co-located within the same community, at least within the access areas where consumption of the output takes place.
Okay, I see.
I actually have a slide where I talked about that very issue you raised. I'll see if I can get to it. But if there are other questions, I'll be happy to take them as well. Yeah, I can't find the slide, but basically that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Not yet from the audience. Can I have another one?
Sure, please.
Okay. So recently we found a new problem here, that in some rural or remote areas, lots of PV panels plan to be built or already being installed, but too much electricity being generated than the local demand.
Okay.
But the utility grid do not have infrastructure to deliver those power to other place. Have you seen this kind of problem in US?
So that is a neat problem, and it's a good problem to have. You know, in the US, the infrastructure is there for net metering.
Okay.
So we have the net metering infrastructure in place, where if you generate more than you consume, you can actually sell to the grid or even just pump it to the grid, and then you get an offset in your next bill, as the case may be. But one other thing that could be done in those societies or in those communities could be maybe they could harness that in storage systems. You know, in other words, if you are generating more than you're actually consuming, perhaps you could use that in a storage and then sell the storage in areas where there are limited accessibility. I think that's a good problem to have, where you are generating excess from a clean technology.
Okay. Even in the very remote areas, is there infrastructure there?
So the thing is, you have states like Arizona, for example. In the state of Arizona, you have very good infrastructure for net metering. In fact, wherever you have the policymaker pushing for solar installations, those infrastructure are in place already. Remember, we're in the era of smart grids. So many of the technologies that are being installed today actually have that bidirectional ability to accommodate and generate electricity and feed into the grid.
Okay, I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your answer. Yeah. So can I have one last question? Lots of questions.
Go ahead.
Yeah. In terms of the research methods by survey, so how many surveys that you send out and how many quality one you get back? And
Very good. So what we
any
did,
tips to perform
oh,
a
so
successful
what we did
survey?
was we actually paid to do this survey. We used Qualtrics. Qualtrics is a company that helps to conduct surveys. So we hired Qualtrics, and I think we paid $10 for each complete response. So Qualtrics deployed the survey for a period of about, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, for which they had it open. And they also identified focus groups. We told them the type of people we're looking for, and they have a database of all sorts of stakeholders. That's what we paid for.
I see.
So they deployed the survey, collected the data, and we harvested the data and analyzed the data. SurveyMonkey also does it, but we used Qualtrics.
SurveyMonkey,
we use Qualtrics, yes.
Okay. So it seems the tools or the channels are very important for the success of
the
survey.
Channels are very important, but we designed the survey questions. We designed, we also designed the way, so when you go into the survey, you read the consent, we had to get an IRB, that's Institutional Review Board. You have to get consent from the respondents. So they read the conditions, then they sign consent, then the survey opens. It asks what type of job they do. If they say, I'm a utility worker, then it asks what type of utility. Is it a utility that already has community solar project or does not have? If they already have, it's a different set of questions. If they do not have, it's a different set of questions. So Qualtrics has the ability to create those, buckets of different questions for different respondents. That's how we ended up with 174 respondents. I think there's a chart that has the distribution of the respondents for the survey by the type of people that responded. If I go all the way back here, right here. Okay, any other questions? Arun, any questions? Ableton, any questions? Ableton? Ableton, are you there? Rui Q, any questions from you? I got so many emails from you. Rui Q is not talking. Rui Q, you know Rui Q, right?
Yeah, we are different people.
I know you are different people, but whoever it is not talking. Yang, hello, Yang. Any questions, Yang? Yang Jongpin? Wei? Henry, any questions, Henry? Gao Shu, any questions, Gao?
Oh, I just enjoy your point. That is very good. No question?
Thank you very much, Henry. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's good to hear people talk. Gao, are you there, Gao Shu? Gao, you are muted. We can't hear you. You Ding, are you there, you? Okay, Arun, you are quiet too. Arun, any questions, Arun? Arun, can you hear me? Okay, let me call one more person. I'm gonna call, who have I not called? Where you yearn? Any questions, where you? Where you, any questions? Oh, if you take my class, you are gonna be talking because I'll ask you questions in class, okay? Anyway, thanks very much. I have to hop to another meeting now, okay?
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for a wonderful results presentation.
Thank you for hosting me. I really appreciate it, okay?
Oh, I'm sorry, so Wei, sorry, I was muted.
Oh, Wei, go ahead, Wei. You have any questions?
No, actually I don't, but I joined very late and because I had another meeting.
Okay.
But I think because of the pandemic situation, we cannot have face-to-face meetings in China right now, but the situation might be changing starting this fall semester.
Okay.
And even in the summer, I think we will have some warm-ups for international talks. And I will be in contact. Thanks a lot. I mean, I'm really sorry for missing your talk. Yeah.
Oh no, that is fine. Wei, I told Rui earlier, I just came out of, battling with COVID myself. Second time COVID infection. I took my booster shot. Yeah, I took my booster shot in December, and I had it in January. Not a single symptom. And then this June, for 2 weeks, I was miserable. So I just came out of that. In fact, my voice, if it wasn't for COVID, I'm sure you'll be putting in an earplug because I tend to shout when I talk.
Wow.
Right.
I mean, if you know that, something that doesn't kill you, that makes you.
It makes you stronger.
That makes you stronger, right? Exactly.
Thank you, Wei. Thank you, Wei. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Shittu. Yeah,
Thank you.
I mean, I hope I could host you in forthcoming events hosted by my university.
I'll be happy to come. I was at Wuhan. I was at Wuhan University in 2019. We left Wuhan end of October. We went for a conference. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is away from Sun Yat-sen University from the Pearl Delta region.
I see.
Now this region is called the Greater Bay Area.
I see.
And we definitely hope we could host some international and overseas speakers in this field in forthcoming events.
That would be fantastic. My PhD student with Japan that started in the fall, he actually had to travel to Singapore to process his visa, and he was able to make it here. So hopefully we get past this pandemic and life can return to normal again.
Come visit us.
I will. I love China. I love China.
I promise. Yep.
I promise I will. Just let me know and I'll be there.
Thank you.
Okay, Rui Jing, thank you so much. Thank you, Yang Zhongping. Thank you. Oh, there comes Rui. Do you have any questions, Rui? Do you have any questions? Yeah, good. Good to see you. Thanks for all the emails back and forth,
Thank you. Thank you for your attending.
And give Dr. What's her name now? Dr. Wang, Chaonan, Dr. Chaonan Wang at Tsinghua. Give her my greetings, okay?
Okay.
Good. Good to see you, Wei.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.